Welcome to the Back to Brick Property Podcast. I'm your host, David Lamb. On this podcast, we'll be stripping property investors and business people alike back to brick to find out how their journey can help you on your journey. Welcome to the Back to Brick Property Show. Today we are blessed with Northeast Property royalty, Steve Green, property investor, developer, award-winning coach, businessman, author and philanthropist. I think I covered most of it, mate.
I forget nowadays, so I'm too busy focused looking forward than what I've done backwards.
Good answer. Didn't prep him for that one. So Steve, thanks for coming on. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thanks. Pleasure.
Good. Great. So we'll get on to the property and business stuff soon enough, I'm sure. But first of all, who is Steve Green and how was life before all of this?
It's a good question. There's a documentary that I did a couple of years ago, Million Lives Changed. And the one question where people are asked of who's Steve Green, every person just stumbled at that question, even people who've known me all their lives. I'm just living every day to the max. That's all I can say. I don't take myself too seriously. I've just been saying it to one of my good friends this morning where they've got the world on the shoulders and I'm just like, look, what can you control? What can't you control? Split the two out. What you can control, do something about it. What you can't, forget about it. Although I have, through a lot of people's eyes, I've achieved a lot on the bigger scheme of things. Who's Stephen Green? Who's talking about the Queen now a couple of years later? And I just think that if you live your life that way, you keeps you humble and I believe you can achieve more when you don't put them pressures on yourself.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I'd agree with that. And if you're always looking forward, you can. Obviously, you've made some huge achievements over the years. If you were fully focused on them, you get a bit consumed by yourself, don't you? Almost sort of look at me type of thing. But if you're always looking forward, you're always looking for the next project, which clearly you are, then I think that's a great way to live. So, what about the early days then? You were in the army, weren't you?
I was. So for me, growing up, mum and dad split up when I was 5. Sort of on and off between 2 and 5, and I went to live with my grandparents for a big chunk of the time. So between my grandparents and my dad, I was very small growing up. I was the smallest person in my school year, and my heroes, the Incredible Hulk, Superman. My dad was very good shape, very fit, and my blueprint of what a hero was, I was not that person. So I struggled with insecurities of who I was. I was very poorly as a child. And then when I got to about 18, 19, which I only just started puberty around that age as well, I was stoned one day with my mates. And I remember looking in the mirror and I actually thought, what a feeble excuse of a man that I was. And I remember going home that night and saying to my dad, I want to start training with you in the gym. And he said to me, when you can do 5 sets of 15 press-ups, I'll let you come in the gym. Bearing in mind I was nearly 19 years old, it took me about 3 months until I could do 5 sets of 15 press-ups. And the day that I did it in my bedroom, I remember buzzing and going downstairs and going, Dad, I've done it. And he went, right, show me. And obviously I was fatigued, so I couldn't do it again. And he was like, right, and I need to see it. So I waited a few days, tried to do it again, did like 4 sets. 5th one, I couldn't get it out. And he was like, you're still not ready. And I was like, but I've done it. And he was like, I need to see it. And it took about another 2-3 weeks until I actually done it. And then he took me to the gym. And I still remember what I bench pressed for the first time. It was a smaller bar, and I had the bar plus the weights was 23 kilograms, and I was struggling to lift it, which shows how small I was. But I stuck with it, and I got a bug for it. I was always fit. I was always mentally strong. I did a lot of running, a lot of cycling from a young age. And once I started to put a bit of weight on, my self-image started to grow, and that blueprint was getting closer to where I felt I should have been and what a man was. And I started to like that. There was probably that triggered more of that ego of who I was meant to be. And then at 21, I decided to go in the army, and at that point, I was quite fit, quite strong, and I was one of the older lads when I went in there.
That's interesting. So even, a few decades ago, we're speaking about here, and you're already, your drive sort of in the early stages came from a negative self-image. You can understand how people that age now, with Instagram and Facebook, and everyone looks the best online, don't they? How they must feel now in today's age. That's interesting. It was a great motivational thing for your dad to do, looking back then, because I think my dad, he'd never stepped in a gym in his life. He'd have been more likely to say, if you can drink 5 pints, you can come to the pub with me, rather than do 5 press-ups and sets of press-ups. So you said you always had that discipline, that drive, into you. Where did the entrepreneurial drive come from? Was your dad that way inclined?
I think it was from 4th year junior. That's how I know it. I know it's all this year 7, 8, 9, 10 stuff now. I don't know. I was 4th year junior last year in my juniors, and I was competing at St. Dominic's School, running. I was a good runner. And Tony Mowbray was there. He was playing for Borough at the time, and my grandma got me his autograph. And I took it into school, showed the kids, and my dad photocopied it for me. At the time, I didn't really know what it was. And he photocopied this thing off about 40 times. And I started to swap the autographs for pens, pencils, chocolate, crisp, stuff like that. And I realised there was real value in this thing that I had hold of, even though it was just a photocopy. And I said to my dad, I need more of them. And he literally printed off 100 of these things. And I got the bug for the exchange at that point. So it was probably a combination of being inspired by Tony and my dad giving me those photocopies of an autograph.
It's interesting that, because generally people say that entrepreneurial drive is hereditary, comes from your parents. If they're a businessman, you're going to be a businessman, business person. But most of the people I've spoken to so far on the podcast, their business and entrepreneurial drive has been circumstantial, like yours was there. So that's really interesting. So when you got in the army, you already had that entrepreneurial drive. Were you frustrated with being in the army? Were you looking to get into business in those days even?
No, I think I didn't really follow up on it, to be honest. I think that was probably the trigger, and it was always, maybe that was the seed. When I went in the army, I was fully focused on just being the best. My dad always pushed me to be my best, to have high standards. I had a tough upbringing. If I squeezed the toothpaste from the middle of the toothpaste, I'd get a whack around the back of the head. Literally, I had to roll it from the bottom. Wasn't allowed to sit on my bed. He was just very strict with me in that way. I remember before I went in the army, I was plumbing and roofing, and I was working for 20 quid a day. And I would cycle to work at 7:30, do a full day's work, cycle home, sometimes pissing down in the rain, come home soaking. And there was a point just before, it was about this time now, this sort of time of the year, just before Christmas, and my boss came to me and said, Stephen, I'm going to have to lay you off for a couple of weeks. There's not a lot of work with it coming up to Christmas. And although I didn't lose my job, he just literally said that it's going to be a couple of weeks until we get a bit of work in. That was on the Friday. On the Monday morning, he came in my bedroom, pulled my duvet off me, grabbed me by the leg, just yanked me out of bed and went, up, dressed, now. I want you stood outside the job centre an hour before it's open. You will be the first person there. And I said, but Dad, I haven't lost my job. I'm going back. And he went, I'm not bothered. And he literally made me stand outside the job centre from 7 o'clock in the morning until the first people walked in the door. So I've had that drummed into me. When I went into the army, I'd done my PTI's course, and I had a bit of a reputation. Like, looking back now, I was very harsh because I had them same expectations of those that I trained. If it was a 4-mile run, it was an 8-mile. If the program was a 4-mile run, they were doing an 8-mile. If it was an 8-mile, they were doing a 12 or 15. And that's just the way that I was. I then started to trade because I was training. I was in the gym. I was buying my own protein. There was a few lads asking me for advice of what should I do, what supplements should I buy, and I just approached the company and just said, look, can you do any discount if I buy decent bit of stuff for me and the lads? And they did me a really good discount. And when I looked at it, I thought, God, this is crazy, like how cheap I can get these. Like, I could sell these at normal price. And that's what I started to do. I started selling supplements in the gym, like protein, creatine, things like that. And I started to make all this extra money on the side, bought a little motorbike and stuff like that with it. And it just, that bug was back there from being a kid, that exchanging, and it didn't stop from that point. That was around about 2003. And then off the back of that, I started buying like cars, motorbikes, selling those. eBay accounts. I just loved the buzz for the exchange. It wasn't even the money. It was just that, like, it was just getting a sale. It was the exchange, that thing I had as a kid.
Doing the deal.
Yeah. Excuse me, 2005, I bought a property in Egypt, and then I started to buy some property over here in the UK, and that's where the sort of property journey started as well.
So why property?
It's a bit of a funny story. So 2001, I bought my first house. So I'd just come back from a tour, saved up a bit of money, and my dad had always been a traditional saver. He always said, keep some money for a rainy day, put some money to one side. And I decided to buy my own house. It was 35 grand at the time, a little 2 up, 2 down, 40 square metre house. And I remember my dad saying that property was going to go up in value. And I knew nothing about property at the time. And I said to my dad, what happens if this property doubles in value? How much of it do I get to keep? And he said, well, you get to keep it all. It's your house. And I said, yeah, but the bank's putting 90% in and I'm putting 10% in. Like, surely I've got to give them 90%, like, of the gain. And he was like, no, it's your money. And I just thought, nah, life doesn't work that way. I'd only been around 23, 24 years at that point, but I just thought, the life I know doesn't work that way. You've got to work for things, and there's nowhere where you put 10% in and someone puts 90 in and you keep all the gain. So I just, in my head, my dad's got it wrong. So I went and spoke to the financial advisor, and I just said, Paul, my dad seems to think if my house doubled, I get to keep the money. And he was like, well, yeah, it's your house. And I didn't believe him. I went and asked a second financial advisor because I thought, he's got it wrong, then he's told my dad the wrong information, because life just doesn't work this way. And I went and asked another independent financial advisor, and he told me the same. He said, but what you've got to bear in mind, if the property goes down, you also lose as well. And I said, yeah, but my dad bought his house for £2,000. It's now worth 60. Like, we all know property long-term doesn't go down. So at that point in my head, I then went back to my dad and went, if your house is worth 2,000, it's now 30 times more that value, and you know you only need to put in 10% and the bank puts in 90, why the hell haven't you been buying more of these things? And I think that was where that real trigger came from. I thought, at some point in my life, I'm going to buy more of these because you can't lose long term. And that's kind of how it started out. 2006, I had a bit more money, and I just thought, right, now feels the right time to put it into property. But my dad was very against it, trying to talk me out of it.
It's interesting the discovering leverage, isn't it? It's even when we chat about it today, and we've both been investing property for decades. It's mental, isn't it? Really, it's the only asset class that the bank will give you most of the money to invest with. You know, if you go and ask for 100 grand's worth of cash to buy shares with, they'll tell you to get out.
Yeah.
Even if you say to Barclays Bank, I'm going to buy 100 grand's worth of Barclays shares, they'll still tell you to get out.
Yeah.
But if you tell them you want 75% of the value of a property, they'll say, sit down, sir.
Yeah.
It's mental, isn't it? And the way you discovered it is very, very similar to the way I discovered it, type of thing. So in that day, sort of how did you find the property? Did you was it a random choice or?
Because my dad said to me that I wouldn't get a tenant, and it would I'd have a second mortgage, or I'd get a tenant and they'd trash it, and now I'd have all the repairs as well. I had fear around that because I looked up at my dad, and I found this little house that was in decent condition. I went and viewed it. It was sort of within my budget. It was on the market for 90 grand, and the day that I went in, they said, "Oh, it's the tenant's property who's in there." And the tenant told me to take my shoes off. Now, bearing in mind that it's not her house and she knows the house is about to be sold, but she told me to take my shoes off. So straight away, because I'd been brought up that way, it was like, you've got respect and pride for this house, even though it's not yours. And even though the landlord's moving you out, you still have respect. And we just got talking, and she said that she didn't want to move. She loved the area. And I said, well, look, I'm actually looking to buy it, to rent it out. Would you look to stay? And we just agreed a price straight away then. And I still have her as a tenant now. So 20 years coming up.
Brilliant. In a different property now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So how was that first, it was obviously, you've answered my next question, which was how was that first experience of being a landlord? I guess from the tenant side of things, it obviously went very positively for you. Yeah,
it was a lot easier than what I expected because she just paid the rent. She said the landlord hadn't been around the house for years and years, and I've only been in her properties, I think, 2 or 3 times since 2006. So I had a really good experience. The one thing I did do, because I had this fear of not getting a tenant and it being trashed, I paid 10 grand over the odds. Now, when I look at that now, it's just crazy because if I was making 3 grand a year off the rent, I needed to get rent for 3 years just to break even. But I didn't have that level of awareness back then. I think I just thought, right, my logic was this. I'm adding in £50 a month into this house. So I was paying £50 more than what the rent was. So I thought, right, £50 a month times 12 is 600 quid a year. Times 10 years is 6 grand. Times 20 years is 12. Times 25 is 15 grand. So I thought, if I had 15 grand into this property, in 25 years, it's fully paid off because it was on repayment. Even if it doesn't go up a penny, this absolutely blows out the water the money I'm putting away into an ISA, which I was putting money into a Standard Life ISA. And I thought, what's the chances of it not going up in value in 25 years? So my logic was, it's going to go up in value. I've got a tenant who wants to stay a long time and she looks after the property. So that was my logic, although now I tell people to make sure they buy below market value. So you've just gained, you've walked into money on day one.
Yeah. Well, it's a sound logic, to be honest. I know obviously you didn't have the education and the knowledge that you have now, but even at that period, it was a sound knowledge. You know, over 25 years, you were always going to win, weren't you? So you've had that first experience, you've got that property, you've got a cracking tenant in there who by the sounds of it, it's never missed a rent payment. Where did you go from there? Where did you then say, right, I want to get more of these? Where do I go from here?
So I used some of my money to buy one in Egypt, which was off plan, and I was able to pay for that over a couple of year period, and I had enough money coming in where I could pay for that. And then I remortgaged my first house I bought in 2001 for 35 grand. No, I sold it, sorry. I sold it at the end of 2006. It completed January 2007, and I sold it for 118,500.
Wow.
So I'd had a massive uplift on that. And I used that money to buy number 2, 3, 4, and 5. But again, I still didn't know what I was doing. I was adding into each property about 50 quid a month. And I was kind of like, whoa, I've got 5 properties here, like bit of a big hitter now. But the reality was none of them were bought below market value. They were probably bought at market value or above market value. And I'll look back and still most of those were mistakes. I didn't really start to find a winning formula until after about 7 or 8 years.
Yeah, and it's why? How did you find that winning formula? Was it through just self-education or?
It's a long story, but it was a hell of a lot of pain. So 2007, I got moved from Surrey to RAF Leman. So I was Royal Engineers in the Army, and there was an attachment with the RAF, and I started to travel in each day, and I started to build up my property portfolio. I was buying property as well, flipping it. I was doing a couple a year, and I was able to do them while I was on tour. So I had a great little strategy where I would buy them, estate agent would interact with the solicitor who had power of attorney. They would, when it complete, let the estate agent know. Estate agent would give my builder the keys. He'd do the works, give the keys back to the estate agent. He would sell it. Solicitor would deal with it all. Money would go in my bank, and all that would happen while I was in Afghanistan or Iraq, Oman, stuff like that. And I started to look and go, I'm out here in these shitty conditions, 55 degrees in Oman, down to minus 25 in Afghanistan, in situations where we're having mortars fired at us, running for bunkers. And I thought, I'm making more money without doing anything. And that was where I felt I needed to make the move. What I was very good at was the delayed gratification thing. So even when I was making 100 grand a year, I was driving a £170 Vauxhall Corsa. And them material things didn't define me. So the lads on camp used to laugh, like I was taking recruits through, and some of them were driving like 10 grand Golfs and stuff like that. And here's me in this 170, the corporal's driving £170 Vauxhall Corsa. But I always knew that one day I would be driving the kind of cars that I am today. So it just kind of built from there, really. I got to the point where I was a little bit bitter in my career in the Army. Something happened, and I just thought it's time for me to get out. And everything was set up. I was making 40 odd grand a year just from flipping a couple of properties, more than my military wage. And then I got out, and literally everything that could have went wrong for me. Just snowballed, and I ended up in a really bad position where I bounced on a number of mortgages. I ended up selling Gemma's car without telling her, just literally to pay the bills. And the very first house I bought with that good tenant, I had to sell it for 10 grand below the price I bought it, so back at the value that it was. And from that pain, I learned, one of my big learns was I was happy to sell that house below market value to get me out of that shit. So I thought maybe there's other people like me who'd be happy to sell their houses below market value. I just need to get on the other side of the fence. I'm on the wrong side. So although that was a painful 10 grand lesson, it was probably, that lesson was worth millions of pounds, that 10 grand loss. So although it felt really bad, at the time, it was probably one of my greatest lessons.
Yeah, for sure. When you hear people's stories over and over again, don't you? You know, when you're in Afghanistan or Oman and your property system over here is just working away, making your money, you're not really learning, are you? It's great. And then you've come back, you've had some a bad turn, if you like, and that's when you really start to learn, isn't it? And especially when it costs you financially, that's when you really start to learn.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely the pain. For me, it was looking at my young daughter, and I remember just coming home one night and looking at my little girl and thinking that I'm failing you, I'm failing my partner, and I just knew it was. Tony Robbins says it, when you're no longer willing to tolerate something, that's when change will happen, and that's when it had to happen.
100%, yeah. So it's interesting that you were doing so much instinctively, like delayed gratification. That's something generally that's taught today. You were, you had it within you from an early age, by the sounds of it, sort of naturally. Also, you hear of investors that live in Manchester that are invested in the Northeast and they panic because they're not here. They can't take full control of it. They put the power team in place, but they're still stressing about everything. You were over in Oman or Afghanistan and it was just taken away from you. It just shows if you've got the right team in place, anything's possible.
Absolutely. One of the things I say to my mentees when they go, yeah, but I live in London or I live in Brighton, and my question is, are you a fucking tree? And when they say no, I go, right, how was I buying property in Egypt and how was I managing things when I was in a war zone?
Yeah.
So it kind of gives them that, oh yeah, I suppose so, yeah.
Kills that argument straight away, doesn't it? Yeah. So what were your main challenges in the early days when you were building that property portfolio? Obviously, you had the bad term when you left the army, but what were the main sort of challenges from a nuts and bolts point of view from building that property portfolio?
Cash flow. I just, there was a number of things went wrong, but because I was adding 50 quid into all of these properties, it was fine when the cash flow was there. But then when something starts to go wrong with the property, your boiler breaks or you've got to change a fuse board, it's coming out of your pocket. And because I had a failed business at that point as well, I had a business that I went into, I was doing really well. And again, I kind of got dragged along by somebody else. And we ended up having to liquidate it. But again, I got some massive learns in that. Because of being hit by that, getting some things wrong with bridging finance, losing money and that, my pot of money ran out. And the old sod's law thing of I'd been making at least 15 grand minimum on any flip I'd done. And the first one when I left the army, I made 8 grand on it. And I was like, fuck's sakes, like, can anything else go wrong? It's
still a decent gain though. But yeah, I guess if you're used to making the more, then yeah. So I guess from those buy-to-lets in the early days, how have you progressed to the sort of deals that you're doing today? What was the journey? Did you go down the normal route of then stepping up to HMO, service accommodation type of thing, or?
Yeah, I went to HMOs in 2011. What I realised in that moment was if I'd have had my properties, I hadn't listened to my dad, because he said, look, son, if you're going to buy property, at least put it on repayment. So I thought, okay, seems logical. I'm chipping down the debts. He said, you don't want all this debt around your head. He hates debt. He won't have it under any circumstances other than his mortgage. If, however, they'd have been on interest only, which I teach people to now, I wouldn't have been adding 50, 50, 50, 50. I'd have been making 150, 150, 150, 150. So I'd have never ended up in the situation and need to sell below market value and bouncing on mortgage payments. So I got my second lesson in that of my properties need to pay me rather than I pay them. And that's when I started to look. I did search on the internet. I was like looking at flats and things like that. 'Cause I thought, right, how can I get these properties to pay me more? Mentors and stuff weren't about then. And I didn't think of reading books or anything. And I was just kind of like thinking, right, I could maybe get flats and they could bring me a bit more in. And then I stumbled across this thing called a HMO, cash cow. And I was just like, whoa, I need one of these. And I spoke to the estate agents and my luck started to change a bit. And I got a HMO, I'd done it up, and that HMO was returning 32 grand a year. And I managed to get out the situation, and I was then making more money from one HMO, spending... I got it to the point where I didn't need to go, because I had one of the tenants who used to manage the little electric cards, give him the spare keys, and I'd give him his 2 cards free a week. And I sat back and I thought, shit, I'm making more money off this than I was like dodging mortars on our tents and stuff like that. That was where the sort of the penny dropped, and I went, imagine if I had 2 of these. Imagine if I had 3 of these or 4 of these. And it was just that thing of, if I had 4 of these, I'd be making more money than air pilots or top surgeons, and I'm not doing any work. And that's where it sort of built up. I started doing commercial or residential, converting pubs, new build. And then I went on to the bigger stuff, like this building now that we're in, which is 25,000 square foot. And this was, I came in here at 18. This exact room was a nightclub. This was our local nightclub in Redcar. And
what was it called back then?
Manhattan's nightclub.
Manhattan's, yeah. I remember Top Deck.
That's further up the other end.
Yeah.
But you can see these are all the steels, and them big columns, and in the back corner the brickwork. That's all. This room had 6 big pillars in it, and it had a big step down. And I remember our structural engineer saying, there's no way you can make a conference room out of this. And I said, look, I've seen it. I've seen people in this room. Just make me it. When they realised I wasn't shifting, they come back and went, right, it can be done, but the size of the steels, we need to prop up a 25,000 square foot building, and the steels are going to be mammoth, and the costs are going to be big as well. And it was, to convert this room was in total has been over £250,000 just for this one room alone.
Wow, okay.
But there's now thousands of people come through here and done training. It's got 10 duplex apartments. It's got a gymnasium, 16 offices, all of our own offices, 2 commercial units. So yeah, it's a big chunk of building.
Yeah. So did you have full confidence when you started doing commercial to resi? It's something I've just started doing recently, the last couple of years. Did you have full confidence going into it, or was it another sort of, did you see it as a massive jump from HMOs? Must have been some apprehension?
It was more of a progression. So I think the first one I did, I've done a lot of shops in the Redcar town area. I did the old sweet shop where I used to get my rainbow drops from when I was a kid. That was a shop, and I put that into 2 apartments. And then I did one that was a 6-bed, and then 6 apartments. Then I did one that was 10 apartments. That was the old station hotel pub in Redcar.
I remember that, yeah.
And then this came on the market, and it's an iconic building to me because there's a lot of emotion attached. This was my nightclub, and upstairs was the gymnasium that my dad used to bring me to when I was 7, 8 years old, and watching all the muscly guys train. And I then trained in this gym from sort of 19, 20 years old when I came home from the army. This is where I trained with my dad. So when the whole building came on the market, it had been empty for over 15 years, and it came on and off over the years, and it got to the point where I felt I was at a stage. I knew it was a big step up, and I knew it was going to be a couple of £1 million spend on it, but I just thought I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be.
Yeah. And the old saying, you don't need to know everything, you just need to know someone who does, don't you? You obviously had a very strong power team in place anyway from the other developments you'd done. So I guess it was like an organic, like you say, process. So everything you do today, do you retain everything that you develop? And do you still retain the properties from back in the day, the original HMOs and the like?
No, I sold both of my HMOs a couple of years ago. I've adapted my portfolio a bit. I've still got some of my original properties. I've got some properties I bought in 2006. I still have them. I've moved away from commercial to residential because there's better strategies. The latest one I bought last year, we bought that for 825 grand plus VAT. and I've been able to get a massive uplift on that one. We bought a chunk of land with it as well for 200 grand, and I've just recently, it's about to go through now. We've had the offer accepted of 400, so it was a 200 grand uplift without doing anything. So there's just a lot. If you know what you're looking for, there's a lot of money to be made with very little effort.
Yeah, so more creative strategies, if you like. And you know that the deal you're talking about, that's the Billingham Business Centre, isn't it? So,
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, so is that serviced offices essentially, and then the land on the side?
It's a bit of a mixture. So it's got a commercial gym there. That's on its own title. It's got a number of sort of car mechanic garages, car spraying garages. It's got a leasehold block on there, and then a number of offices as well. And we're looking to move some of our business into there also. So it's again, it's a big chunk. I mean, the land on the side's 2.3 acres. It's probably a 5 acre site or something like that.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So you're doing these massive developments now, being creative with your strategies. Do you think, in your opinion, that standard buy-to-let investment still works today?
Yes, it definitely works. It doesn't work as well as what it did when the rates were low. Although I say that because rents have jumped up so much, now could actually be a very good time to buy buy-to-lets, because I lost touch with them because I'm looking at more of the bigger stuff. I tend not to look at what rents are, and I don't deal with that. I've got a team now, and I tend not to look on Rightmove and stuff like I used to. And it was kind of last year, or earlier this year, I had a look and I just couldn't believe how much rents had gone up by. Probably why my team keep giving me a headache of, we need to lift the rents up. And I'm like, no, because it's not all about making money for me. I quite like the fact that if I've got a good tenant, I haven't put the rent up on them. And some of my properties are way below what they should be, especially once I checked out what the rents were. But I just look at that, and when them rents have gone up, the margin, although the interest rate's gone up, rents have gone up, margin's probably not too much, not changed too much. If the interest rates come back down, and we're already seeing now the banks are already bringing the rate down, regardless of the Bank of England bringing down the base rate, mortgage companies are bringing down the rate. If we see a drop, which I think we will in March time, then margins could be bigger on buy-to-lets than they've ever been because of the rent increase and that doing that the other way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think, it's a guessing game at this stage, I guess, but I think we could have the perfect storm next year. Like you said, rates are going to come down. Lenders need to lend. They're becoming more competitive, irrespective of what the base rate's doing to a certain extent. Rents have gone through the roof. I mean, supply and demand, you know yourself, you can't get, there's such a low stock of rental stock in the Northeast and nationwide, I think. So, yeah, I think you're right. I think with rents being high, I think vendors, because of the interest rate rises, are becoming a little bit more realistic. And that mixed with lower interest rates, I think we could have a real sweet spot of a window.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer in when there's difficult times, somebody's benefiting. And my advice to people is always try and get on that other side of the fence. I've been on both sides, so I know what that's like. So now I'm always looking and going, if there's a positive, there has to be a negative. If there's a negative, there has to be a positive. And some people will win and some people will lose. So gain knowledge, build your skill set, put yourself around the right kind of people and put yourself on the right side of the fence.
Yeah, 100%. So I want to touch on the Debenhams building, which I know you were looking to purchase and potentially move some of your team into that. So what's the latest progression with that?
We've pulled out on that, which is a shame because we were actually going to buy both the Debenhams building and the House of Fraser building, which are over 200,000 square foot between them both. Massive chunks of building. I get frustrated. I've got to be careful here because I antagonise the wrong people, but I get very frustrated with local authorities because of the money that they waste. My experience with building control, planning department, HMO officer, social services, which I've had to deal with, have all been absolutely brilliant. I really struggle with the commercial departments because they've got people in there that are not commercially minded. They're not entrepreneurs, so they make weak decisions. Our council, our previous leader, just ridiculous amounts of money lost. And that's why I've sort of clashed with them. There's a big push for the high street. I'm responsible for over 34 shops and buildings developed in the Retcar area, so a massive amount. And I could have done the same in Middlesbrough if they'd have worked with me. There was a lot of talk around grants being offered out. House of Fraser's gone, Debenhams has gone, Topshop's gone, Marks and Spencer's has gone. All of the main people in that area. One of the directors that works for me, Eric, he sold his business out to Mike Ashley. And Sports Direct and Flannels are really keeping that area alive right now. Mike will close those down. It's as simple as that. If they don't do something quickly, that'll be closed down, and there'll be no recovering from that point. You'll end up with all pound shops. You won't be able to bring the bigger people back in. I believe I was one of the only people in this area that could have regenerated Middlesbrough High Street because of my ambitions and the goals and where we're going and the track history of doing these developments and seeing them to completion. Because I've learned from my mistakes about 4 years ago where I was led down the garden path of, it was this building, and I was told, if you renovate this building, we will give you grants to remove the asbestos and we'll help with these other bits, grants for growth and stuff like that. I was told I'd get in the region of 130 grand. When we bought it, I was told that was going down to 30, which actually ended up down to 20 grand. I'd accounted for that money, so it was a massive deficit from the start. But I learned from that. I thought I won't put myself in that situation again. So when these guys were like, complete on the building and we will give you these grants, we'll remove the business rates for a period of years, which I asked for. I just said, look, you remove the business rates and then let me develop the building. I'll get this one done and then I'll do the House of Fraser one next door. The businesses that I had going in there would have regenerated that area. It would have brought thousands of people into that area very quickly. What I noticed was the usual sort of authority mentality of complete it and then we'll give you the funds. And I just thought, I've learned from that. Show me the document that you will wipe out this business rate and then I'll go ahead. And I had the seller... it was a repossession, so the liquidation company that were dealing with it, they were putting pressure on saying, look, you need to complete. And I was just like, I'm not completing unless they show me some hard documents. I'm not going ahead because I know what will happen. I'll complete and they'll just hammer me with that 150 grand a year business rate while I'm trying to develop, or just straight away anyway, which is a killer on the cash flow, which is something the government have got to change anyway. And they wouldn't give me it. So I just looked and I went back to them and I said, look, if you don't show me that document, I'm going to be pulling out. And they wouldn't show me it. So that's what I've done. I just think it's such short-sightedness, but there you go.
It just doesn't make any sense. There's such a limited amount of buyers out there for such a project. And there's such limited amount of use and businesses that are demanding such a size. So I don't understand, without saying too much, I don't really understand what they hope to achieve long term with it. You got two lovely, massive buildings just stood empty, and like you said, in the heart of the town. It's the heartbeat of the town, Linthorpe Road. You know, their options are very, very limited, aren't they? You'd think they'd be doing everything they could.
The initial call was that, was very positive. we will help you. They asked me what I wanted. I just said, just remove the business rates. And they said, is that all you want? And I said, yeah. And they said, we're not getting business rates, so we're no worse off. And it was very positive. And then the usual crap of, we now need to see a proposal, we need to see this and that. And I put all that work in, and it was just, the appetite wasn't there. So
frustrating. I'm sure it was. It was a very frustrating process for yourself. So, how do you the bigger developments? How do you go about financing them? Do you use development obviously a bridge and then development finance?
I've got a number of ways. So most developers can't succeed because their biggest hurdle's raising finance. I'm responsible for helping people raise over 100 million in the last 3 and a bit years. It's something that I find very easy. I was a part of the board that are bringing the arena to Redcar, and that's a £70 million deal. And we've been able to do that without any public money. So just getting investors. I prefer to deal with investors now than using bridging, although I will still use bridging finance. What I like about investor money is you can get it very quickly. You're not paying a lot of the arrangement fees, exit fees, and you don't have all the bullshit of jumping over hurdles that they want to see, and they want to secure almost your heart against the asset. Gone are the days where it's secured against just the asset. They want PGs and everything like that. I just prefer working with investors, but a combination. I'll use development finance. I will use bridging. I will use deferred consideration, which is one of my preferred strategies of agreeing something with a seller where it's paid out over a period of time or the back end. And if you know how to structure those deals, you can do some very creative things there. And then I have regular investors. I think when I was going to buy the Debenhams building, I was looking to raise 400 grand, and I raised the full 400,000 in 7 days.
Bloody hell. That's some going. When you're using private investors like that, do you suffer any friction from them? You know, when you're doing the developments the size of the ones that you are doing now, you know, things don't always go to plan. Programs get blown out, don't they? Do you suffer any friction, them stress and worrying, or is this, do they almost get too involved with the process, or are they happy just to give you the money and say, crack on?
This is a really good question because most people get this wrong. Most people, when they're doing business in general, they'll do business with anyone with a pulse. You need to be very clear of who you're doing business with. And just because someone's got 100 grand, a lot of people look at that and they'll go, wow, I can use this 100 grand, or I need it right now. And they'll give all the promises of, you can come on site and I'll do this, and I've got 100% track record, and you can ring me anytime. You can all of that stuff, and they create a world of pain. I set very strong expectations, so I'll say this is going to be a 6-month project. I need at least a 4 months buffer on that. And then another 3 months after that, if I've still gone over, we'll start to pay a bit of a default. I do visits, but it's once a month. It's appointment only. I will control the appointments. They'll be between that time and that time. We'll put them out. And I pre-qualify them. I ask them where they've got the money from. Why do they want to be involved in the project? What would they do if the project ran over? So I want to make sure we're a right fit at the front end. And if you do that, you can virtually eliminate any issues. I did have one difficult investor on this development, just very unreasonable, difficult. We were in a fucking pandemic, and it's like, it's my fault that I can't get materials, and the lenders have closed down, even though the contract actually said as long as I continue to pay the default interest, I hadn't broke the contract. We did have one difficult person, but I believe that's just unfortunate. You're always going to get one dickhead.
Yeah, and you can see why people would rush into bed with someone on an investment if they're desperate. They've seen the deal they want. They know the numbers work. They're desperate to get hold of cash. Obviously, they'll promise them the world at the front end. Like you said, it can end up in a world of pain. So obviously, you've learned from experience again to set specific boundaries on each one.
I watch it with my own mentees. So those that I've trained, they do the same thing. And one thing they do badly is they don't update the investor. So I am regular on those updates. A month out, I'll tell them if we're on track, if they're going to be paid out. If it's going to be over, I manage their expectations. If something's gone over, I'll give them reassurance of where there's security, why things are still on track. I'll give them copies of most recent valuations. If I need to do further visits to reassure them at that point, I will increase the visits that they can do. So you've got to look at, as the developer, yes, set them expectations. It's got to work two ways. But if you've gone over, you need to manage the expectations. You've took someone's hard-earned money and you need to treat them with respect. For me, I think the reason why, even when we've gone over, our investors have always been comfortable because we've just been mega transparent of this is where we are. Come and have a look. This is how your money's secured. There's the latest valuation. And I generally find if you're honest with people, then they'll have that trust. So you've got responsibility as well as the developer to show up a certain way.
Yeah, for sure. So last couple of questions on property, because I want to move on to business stuff. But what's your best ever property purchase, and why? And then your worst ever purchase and why?
Oh, good question. My worst one. Oh God, I've had a good lesson from my worst ones. Some of my worst ones have probably been my best ones in some respect. I would say my worst one was probably the one when I just left the army and I made $8,000 from a flip. Just purely because it didn't make the money that it did, and there was no real learn there other than maybe, I mean, there's always a learn. The only learn was probably things aren't going to go as smooth as you think they are. So it's a bit of a bore. In fact, no, I'll tell you one that I did make a cock up on. I made a cock up on one with Bridging Finance and I lost $20,000, didn't go ahead with the deal. When I look back, though, that was more of bad advice from the legal team rather than a mistake I made. I don't know what the pain would have been because they obviously said to me, look, if you go into this, there's all these penalties and stuff like that. And they made it that scary that I pulled out and I lost $20,000. So who knows? Maybe I'd have gone ahead and it'd have been fine. Or maybe they were right and I'd have been in a bigger problem. So, yeah, that was probably my worst one. Best one, I think, was probably back in the day. I did a flip that was renovated at 5.5 weeks' work and made $40,000. Although I've made a lot more money now, like buying the piece of land and making 200,000 on it with no work is a far greater gain. But in perspective of where I was at the time to make that chunk of money in such a short period, that probably stands out to me.
Yeah, great. So moving on from property, I know you're a big advocate of self-discipline, and we've touched on where that comes from your father, it sounds like, and then obviously magnified through your army career.
Yeah.
How is your morning routine? I'm always interested. The Instagram world seems obsessed with the morning routine. What's yours?
I wouldn't recommend following it. I'm always awake by 5. Sometimes, like yesterday, I was up at 3 o'clock. I go to bed early though, so I'm usually in bed for 9, and I usually get up about 3:30. I like working why it's quiet, why I've got a psychological edge over people. I've always thrived off that sort of sickness of doing things that I know the people aren't doing. And I think that's where it came with driving the 170 quid car. It was like, I don't have to drive this car, but I'm fucking going to drive it because it doesn't define me. And one day I'm going to be driving the cars I know I am. So I think I've got a bit of a sick side to that. The guys were laughing in here the last couple of days because I was away with Josh Kelly on the boxing team. I'm a part of his team on the performance side of things, and I had a few days of eating breakfast on the morning, fried breakfast and stuff like that. So the last couple of days I've had dry jacket potato with chicken, and all the team are just like, how are you eating that? And I'm like, I deserve this. This is my punishment for being that way. So I like things to be difficult. I've done marathons at midnight just for the hell of it. Sometimes I think you've got to go out there and just do something you really don't want to do. Run when it's dark and raining. Train through the middle of the night. I like getting up at 3 o'clock. So yeah, I probably wouldn't recommend it, but
yeah, it's inspiring, and you see the likes of David Goggins drilling it into people now as well. It's a big thing, isn't it? I'm a half-4 riser, but that's early enough for me. So now I guess from a self-discipline point of view, from your property education business, are you trying to instill those qualities in your students as well? It seems like your education business, it's more than a property education business now.
Yeah, I mean, it probably always was, to be honest. People say to me, who's this property guy think he is teaching mindset? When the reality is I'm the mindset guy that got into property. It was the only thing I was ever passionate about from a kid. I hated school. I just loved sport. I loved psychology, human behaviour. I was always fascinated with that side of things, from the army, being a PTI, doing my training courses. Performance is the biggest part of my life. If you said to me now, you can only make one decision and it's either property or mindset, which is I'm choosing mindset all day long. I'm the mindset guy that's just, I know how to put that performance into anything that I do. I'm very creative with property, and I believe I'm one of the best trainers in this country in what I do, because I don't just teach something off a PowerPoint. I do it myself. I do developments at that level, but the mindset part's a massive part of my life. It's the foundations to everything, and that comes through in my training. People lost 10 stone in weight. People gone from antidepressants. The amount of people who've come off antidepressants, depression, who are now just achieving amazing things. People gone on to break world records. I've had 2 people this year that helped break my own world record. So it's a mega part of my life, which is why now the clothing brand, the whole discipline thing, it's important to me. This is my life now. This is more important to me than anything else, other than cleaning a few things up and making sure my kids are secure. Building the brand is my number one thing now.
Yeah. So it sounds like property is just one channel, one way of channeling your mindset sort of outlook into your life. Property is just one leg of that.
Absolutely, yeah. Property and business. I love business acquisitions. I love everything to do with business, marketing, sales, the systemization, buying out businesses, just everything about business as well. My partner teaches business, but I love that as well. It just something that's always give me a buzz.
Yeah, okay. So what made you get into the education industry?
It was a big part of my life. In the military as a PTI, the first lesson I ever took, my officer commanding came out the gym. I made a right mess of it. And I was so nervous as well. And he came out and he pulled my gym boss and said, that's the worst lesson I've ever been on. And really knocked me at a time that I was on the ground. And I was very fortunate that I had a very good boss, and he'd only been my boss the day before. It was my second day in the gym. And he turned around to the OC and said, with all due respect, sir, it's his second day on the job. I'm sure you work perfect on your second day of teaching. If he's like that in 3 months, I'll be concerned, and kind of shooed him off. And he just put an arm around me and just said, look, I expected you to cock up. You're also going to cock up on Thursday, and you're also going to cock up on Friday. And next week you'll cock up, but it won't be as bad. And next month you'll cock up and it won't be as bad as that. And I was a bit like, shit. But he's the best leader I've ever had, without question. An absolute inspiration to me. And he just guided me. And I got good at it. I started to enjoy it and giving back to the lads and writing training programs. I used to do it on a night, on a weekend. I wasn't paid for it. I just thrived off it. And then I decided in the military I wanted to take a full-time post in teaching, which I did for 3 full years, teaching the recruits. And it wasn't... after that, I took another teaching post where I was section commander, was on CARDA course. And it wasn't until after I came out, I still didn't realise it, I used to teach people in my conservatory for free. I just love that side of it. And I said to one of my mates, I said, I'm thinking about doing this a bit more serious, like maybe he's running a few like paid classes and things like that, or a bit around the mindset, and maybe he's a bit on property and that. And I said, like, when I look back, I said, I think they were like my best times in the army. And this guy knew me really well, and he was like, no shit. He went, have you just worked it out? He went, you're a completely different person. He was like, you're this robotic fucking person when you're interacting with people. He said, put you on a stage and you just... when you're teaching, you're just a completely different person. And it was like, then I thought, shit, like all of these times I've been at my most happiest, I was teaching. And that, kind of set it up from there. And I love doing it. I've got good balance. I don't want to do it every day. I only run 7 courses a year, but I really enjoy what I do. I love that. I still have that section commander mentality of looking after you guys. And I see my mentees like that. I want the best from them. I'm tough with them, but they inspire me when it lights me up when I see them getting results.
I was going to say, I've seen some of the results that some of your students have had, and it must be very rewarding for you.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I love the property stuff. I mean, some of the guys now have got from scratch. I taught them 3 years ago, and they've got £7 million portfolios, and there's lots of them who've broke the 5 million now that I've taught from scratch. The most rewarding is when, like today, I got a post, a lady saying that off the back of Elite, she's now applying for jobs and got a job that she never thought she was capable of getting. So I love it when some people take the piss and call me the marriage counsellor, because the partners go off home from training and they just have more awareness of who they are, how they show up. And I love the stuff where people have better relationships with the kids, with the wives, the husbands, losing weight, stop smoking, making more money through better paid jobs and things like that. Just becoming better people. That's the most rewarding. Yeah,
so it's not always about the multi-million-pound property portfolios that people create. Like you said there, that lady's gone away and she's got the job she dreamt of. You know, it's not all about quitting the day job and making millions, is it? It's about achieving whatever is the priority for you.
Absolutely. It's so true. I posted a video this morning. So what's the date today?
22nd. 22nd?
Okay, so people will be able to see it, so they know I'm not bluffing. What time are we now? It's 11:30 on the 22nd of December, 2023. If you go on my Facebook page this morning, you will see me post where I said I posted one of my all-time favourites, which was Earl Nightingale, and it's called The Greatest Secret. And he says that the definition of success is the progressive realisation of a worthy goal. And that's about doing whatever lights you up. So he says, if you're a mother who just wants to bring up your children, that's your true passion, you are a successful person. If you're a camera guy, if you're a mechanic, whatever that is, if you're doing your thing, social media right now is brainwashing people in that everyone needs to be entrepreneurs and you need to have your own job and not working for somebody else. The amount of people that have left my organisation and have asked to come back after setting up their own business, I've lost count now. So I encourage people to do what they want to do rather than following this bullshit of everyone needs to work off a laptop from the beach, not doing work and having your own business. Find out what you like. Some of my staff members are extremely happy. They're paid more than what people are who have their own businesses and they're in an organisation where there's opportunity for growth. Social media right now, I think, is creating a lot of confusion.
Yeah, it can be quite a toxic place for a number of reasons. That's definitely one of them. So how important do you feel that both physical and mental fitness are when it comes to business?
Essential. I'm not saying that somebody who's not fit and healthy can't work hard and have a successful business. But as a human being, you will never reach your true potential unless mind, body, and spirit are all aligned. And that's something that I work on. So I make sure that my mind's prepped, it's solid, it's very robust, that my body is strong, it's fit. And I'm also very spiritual. I believe that we are more than this vessel and these 2 words, Stephen Green, that somebody else give us. I believe with the life that occupies this smaller thing. If you don't give equal focus to those 3, you'll never be your true self. And you will have somebody like me who knows I can outperform you because I know that mentally, physically, fitness, spiritually, you can't compete with someone like me because when you have that, someone will go further than you and your fitness and health has a limit. Now, it doesn't matter if that's true or not, what I've just said, in terms of somebody like me will always beat you because you could easily have somebody else with that Goggins mentality who'll go, you think so, son? Okay, let's go. But if you don't believe that, you can never be that.
Yeah, agreed. So what's next for Steve Green? Where do you see yourself in 5 years, say, and what challenges have you set yourself?
I'm very content now. I've learned that in my drive for being a millionaire, which I needed for ego purposes to fill the self-image thing. I don't need that now. I'm content. I don't need my car. I don't need the house. I just believe that we should just show up the best we can every day. Just enjoy life. It's very short. Just be the best person you can possibly be. But that doesn't stop me from driving for more because I believe that we are creators and we should be creating. I have financial targets. The more money you've got, the more you can give away. I do a lot for charity work now. I want to grow a global brand. Discipline will be a global brand. I've already seen it. And just like everything else I've achieved, once I've seen it and I put full focus to it, it will happen. That's an absolute guarantee. So if I die tomorrow, I die happy. But my mission is to grow the brand.
Right. And how do you want that brand to be seen? When people see the Discipline logo, like you say, worldwide, what's the immediate thought that you wish them to have?
The best version of yourself.
Right. Great answer. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
Your problems aren't going away. They're here forever. It doesn't matter what level you are, if you're a homeless guy on the street or you're the CEO of one of the top global businesses, your problems aren't going away. accept it. And when you accept that, there can be challenges and you can learn to navigate and learn from them. When you have that mentality, life stops beating you up as much.
Yeah. Stop being a victim. Yeah, for sure. So, last couple of questions that I ask every guest. If you could offer one piece of advice to a first-time property investor today, what would that be?
It's going to sound cliche like the fucking sales point thing, but it's don't struggle alone. I do it now in everything that I do now. If I want an answer, I pay for it. I won't do anything where I learn from it. So buying out the accountancy business, the clothing business, we spent £100,000 on consultants. I want somebody who can give me, if you turn that flip chart over, and you'll see the word that I told my team. There we go. Speed. Okay, so everything that I do, I want to do it as fast as I physically can. And the way you do that, the quickest way to wealth and success is get somebody who's been there to show you exactly what to do rather than you trying to figure the shit out.
Yeah, you can certainly learn from your own mistakes and your own failures, and I think they are the best learnings. But yeah, you can certainly learn a lot quicker by taking note of other people's mistakes, that's for sure. So if you could start all over again, we'll go back 30 years, your dad's telling you not to buy property, etc., etc. You've just done your first set of 5 push-ups. If you could go back to that point, what would you do differently?
Nothing. Somebody said something to me last year, and I just thought, wow, I've never looked at it that way. They said to me, tell me one of your worst times that if you had the ability to, that you could take it away. And I sat there and I thought about it, and I thought there isn't any, because every one of those times have made me who I am. And if somebody's watching this and they may be struggling, whatever that tough time is, your biggest lesson lies in that problem. And that person then told me that when they ask that question to people, when they truly think into it, none of us truly want to change the pain points that we've had, because we wouldn't be where we are today without those. And we wouldn't have the opportunity we have today without those. So as much as I've rode that ride of pain, journey of pain, I wouldn't change a thing.
Yeah, agreed. And they said hard life or hard times lead to an easy life. Easy times lead to a hard life. So that sort of fits in with what you're saying there. So, Steve, thanks so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. I could sit all day and talk to you. I wish you all the best for the future. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best place for them to do that?
Instagram, Steve.Green Property Trainer if it's the property side. I have the Discipline site on Instagram, or just Stephen Green on my Facebook pages. That's the big one. Keep an eye on that because it's going global.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing it in the future. If you are listening or watching online, please do like and follow. It really does help. Until next time, take care.